We are ready, yes.
Okay, hold on one second. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Cantlow, and I am the counsel to the Borough President. Tonight, I'd like to welcome you to the December 21st, 2020 ULURP hearing. I'm joined by Ina Buzenveld, who is the Land Use Coordinator, as well as Richard Barrick, who is the Land Use Director. And we're also joined by David Perez, who is our Director of IT. Viewers may request to testify via the WebEx chat function. Viewers may also submit your comments to Ask Eric at brooklynbp.nyc.gov for Borough President Adams' consideration. Please call the first item and let us begin.
Calendar item 1, 200344ZMK, 200343ZRK, 200326ZSK.
These applications submitted by Sudam Inc. and 3120 Willoughby LLC pursuant to sections 197-C and 201 of the New York City Charter for land use actions affecting 10 lots on a block bounded by Sudam Street and Irving, Willoughby, and Wyckoff Avenues. These include a zoning text amendment to establish a new special mixed-use R7D M1-5 district consisting of 7 lots. A zoning map amendment to map such district along with M1-5 and R6 districts within portions of the rezoning area. A zoning text amendment to designate a mandatory inclusionary housing area with the R7D M1-5 district and a special permit to waive a requirement of 35 accessory parking spaces. Such actions are requested to facilitate a 95-unit affordable residential building at 1250 Willoughby Avenue and enlarge an existing industrial building at 349 Sudam Street in Brooklyn Community District 4. Community Board 4 voted to approve this application with conditions on December 16th, 2020. Would Richard Lobel, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Good evening, Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. I'm joined by Fayan Baton from my office, who will be sharing her, who will be assisting me in the presentation. Annie Tershwell will be joining us on the applicant team as well. Getz Opsfeld and Matt Lanuzzi are here from the applicant, as well as Jill Crawford. So I'm just going to briefly introduce the project. Annie's going to run through the extensive community engagement which took place with regards to the application. I'm then going to talk about some of the zoning actions that are sought through the application, and then Annie's going to discuss the particulars of the project, including the building program as well as the physical layout. Next slide. So Annie, can you please discuss the community engagement?
Sure, absolutely. I think I've unmuted myself. Hi, my name is Annie Tershwell, and I'm a principal of Type A projects. As Rich has just mentioned, I'm also joined this evening by my partner, Jill Crawford of Type A projects, in addition to Getz Opsfeld of Community Developers, Inc., and Matt Lanuzzi of Cheever Development. Collectively, we have decades of experience building affordable housing and manufacturing spaces in New York City. And I think the fruits of those long careers will be quite obvious as we walk through this project, not just in our motivations, but in our execution. As you can see from this list of community engagement meetings and site visits, this project has been formed and formed and evolved over the course of these years based on extensive community and elected official engagement. We have spent years prior to even thinking of certifying a ULURP, meeting with the community, meeting with elected officials, working with city planning to make sure that we could responsibly end up in the ULURP process. I think you'll see that this project has indeed been informed by this interactive process and is a uniquely balanced community-centric project with both affordable working spaces and affordable living spaces. I think perhaps the project was a little ambitious, which is why it has taken us 6 years to get here. But we're really excited and pleased to be here, certainly on the heels of the community board's approval. And after Rich runs you through the zoning related to the application, we will walk you through the development side of the project.
Thank you, Annie. So if we can have the next slide. So you'll notice that the project area is included within the circled area, and the subject block is currently located in an M11 zoning district. There's currently also an R6 zoning district to the south of the property on the southern portion of the block, which currently houses a school that will be affected by the proposed rezoning as well. Next slide. So there's 4 basic actions which are sought pursuant to the subject application. The first of those is a text amendment application. The reason for the text amendment application is because we're creating a new special mixed-use district. This is an MX21 district. You can see it on the Willoughby side of the property, which is pairing an M15 district with an R7D district. This density and height is seen as being appropriate for the area, particularly in light of the existing R6, which exists on the southern portion of this block, as well as along many blocks to the south. In addition to the text amendment, which creates that MX21 district, there's a zoning map amendment which accomplishes 3 things. The first is to actually map that MX21 district from the mid-block west through the project site to the Willoughby side of the property. The second is to take the existing M11 and to rezone that with an M15 district, and you'll see this on the Sudam side of the property to the eastern portion of the property. And in that property is currently an existing 3- and 4-story manufactured building. In addition, there's an amendment to the southern portion of the block. You may see that the existing R6 is extended 25 feet. That's merely to correct a split lot condition, so it's more of a corrective action than anything. In addition to the text amendment and rezoning, there's an additional text amendment, of course, for the mapping of mandatory inclusionary housing as is required pursuant to any residential rezoning, creating a minimum number of residential units or residential square footage. And finally, there's a special permit pursuant to 74533 of the zoning resolution, which will waive the required 36 accessory off-street parking spaces. So you've got an entire project area with 40,000 square feet, which is bifurcated by this building is described on the eastern Sudam portion and these vacant lots that are on the western portion. Next slide. So as is common with all our applications at city planning, we include site photos. You can see the existing 4-story building on the first photo on the top left portion of the slides. And again, we include other parcels and other photos of the immediate area. You can see that as is expected in the current M11 zoning district, you have a lot of manufacturing uses, industrial uses. There's vacant lots. It's an area which really, after our discussions with the community and others, would really seem that this application was merited and that there was a real need for the additional development that is going to be created through the application. David, if you want to page through the next 2 slides, there's just additional photos of the buildings in the area. And then finally, you'll come on the next slide to the area map. One more slide. We lost David. Ah, oh, that looks like, I think that's an actual photo. Did I lose the area map?
No, I think it's a couple slides back.
Again?
No, back,
Back.
not forward. Oh, you might have pressed it.
Almost there, one more.
It's almost there. It's lagging a little for me.
That's no problem. While we have it up on the screen, in front of us is the zoning change map. You'll see the existing M11 and R6 districts on the central block. And now forward one. There we go. Okay, good. So, right. So this is the area map. What do we notice from a review of the area map? So you can look at the existing property, which is highlighted in red, which is discussed is bifurcated by vacant lots on the western portion of the assemblage and this 3 and 4 story manufacturing building on the eastern portion of the assemblage. So the proposed M15 is appropriate for the manufacturing building, which will allow for a slight enlargement of the existing facility, as Annie can discuss. And the vacant portion will be occupied by this residential building, as will be discussed by Annie. Well, we note that the existing R6 building on the southern portion of the property is the school building, which currently is massed at roughly 94 feet. So you've got some density in the area and heights which really merit the proposed bulk that we're discussing. So the next slide is going to be the zoning change map. Right, so here we have the zoning change map. You can see the existing M11 district on the left side of the screen, and on the right side, after the change, you've got the M15 district, as well as that gray area, which will now be a mixed-use district, special district, an MX21 with an M15 paired with the R7D. In addition, you'll notice that the R6 district on the southern portion of the block is now extended 25 feet to correct the split lot condition. With that, I would hand the presentation over to Annie, who can discuss the massing of the buildings as well as the programs for use.
Yes, thank you. You can please go to the next slide. So as discussed, this project is really a mix between affordable living and affordable working spaces. The manufacturing portion of the project is an extension of an existing manufacturing building that's a little over 42,000 square feet. We intend to build a little over 14,000 square feet on the existing structure for a building, a proposed building floor area of 56,580 square feet after the improvement. And again, I think as Rich is saying, was remarking, the density for the manufacturing building really is built off of the existing manufacturing building and quite contextual. I'm going to talk a little bit about the manufacturing building in the slides coming up. So I think we can switch to the next slide, please. The residential portion of the building is meant to house approximately 95 units of affordable housing. We intend to have this project fall under the mixed income program with HDC, the M squared mixed middle program. We have already been in conversations with them over the course of the last number of years, including most recently as term sheets have begun to change. This building, again, is approximately 95 units. It's a mix of unit sizes, which I'll walk you through on a upcoming slide. If you wouldn't mind, perfect. So the existing building, again, is a 43,000 square foot industrial building, currently tenanted with manufacturing tenants. We'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But it's important to note the development team, Matt and Getz, have been owners of this building for the last 20 years, and it has solidly been tenanted by light manufacturing tenants. In fact, part of our community engagement process included walkthroughs with the Department of City Planning, where folks were able to see firsthand the types of manufacturing tenants that were currently in the building, certainly as an indication of what has been there in the past and what we intend to develop the new square footage for. As you guys probably know, this is a very well situated building close to public transportation and adjacent to an in-place community of workers. And we intend for the additional manufacturing space to be tenanted very much in keeping with the tenants we have now, so small to mid-sized production spaces. Next slide, please. I think it's just important to note, again, as sort of city planning and the community was also interested to learn and relearn in certain instances, that again, the building has been populated by light manufacturing tenants for as long as Matt and Getz have owned the building. We've decided to highlight two particular tenants. One, Nala Inc. is a furniture design company that has been a tenant for 14 years, and Molina Carpentry, who's been a tenant for now over 6 years. I think it's interesting to note these two uses. The building used to be tenanted by more garment manufacturing tenants, but as that industry has left New York City, sadly, we are super pleased to have existing woodworking and carpentry tenants grow within the building. And so we're super proud of these tenants. And again, representative of the long commitment to manufacturing in the building and a bellwether for the type of tenancies that we look to enjoy as we move forward with the expansion of the building. So again, with this expansion, we intend to build onto the existing manufacturing building, approximately 14,000 square feet. We think that given the density of the workforce in the building already, we think that that will lead to about 25 to 35 new local jobs. As part of the addition, we will also do upgrades to the building's facade. I think it's interestingly, and as folks have walked through the building, certainly in Bushwick, this building very much feels like a manufacturing building, and it's tenanted as such. And so the upgrades that we're going to be making to the buildings are in line with that manufacturing tenancy. Next slide, please. That's just a quick rendering of the additional manufacturing space, again, woven into the fabric of the existing manufacturing building. This image is the new residential building, again, 100% affordable building to be built in line with the mixed income M² program. Next slide, please. Again, 95 units. We've provided here a breakdown of the unit mix and unit sizes. In response to the community's urging for family size units, you will see that 55% of the units are indeed family sized. We think it's rather unique that a building of this size in this community only has 9 studio units, about 10% of the building's overall unit mix. That was intentional. That's come after conversation, again, with the community to make sure that we were providing 2 and 3 bedroom units, which represent the community's desire for units to meet their needs for families. You'll also see up above that we have listed the AMI breakdowns. This is in line with mandatory inclusionary housing requirements. We're falling under option 1. So you'll see that 25% of our units serve individuals of less than 60% of AMI and below, with 10% of those units at 40% of AMI or below. But this is obviously intended to be a mixed income building. We look at this project as really part and parcel of each other, that the manufacturing space and the residential space is one large development. And the way that we were able to afford to build more manufacturing spaces by having by looking at this project as one large mixed use project. So the mixed income affordable housing underwriting is really what allowed us to build such a sort of complicated and mixed-use project. Next slide, please. We've inserted here just the city's guidelines for AMIs based on family size and income levels. We can certainly come back to this slide should anyone want to spend more time on it. And we've also included, not for you, just for you guys, obviously, but for the community. It was really important that conversations with the community focused very concretely around what rents were intended to be for this project. Obviously, these are 2020 HPD rents, and while we are just in ULURP and hope to have this progress smoothly, it's unclear as to whether there'll be 2020 rents or not, but we've been told to use these as a guideline in our conversations with the agencies. And so we've included them here, and also again in discussions with the community and the community board, so they get a true sense and full sense of the tenancy and the rents of the building. So obviously a bit schematic at this early stage, but you will see that we have distributed unit sizes throughout the building between studios, 1s, 2s, and 3s. Next slide, please. Again, just another sample floor. And the next slide, another sample floor. So again, just intended to make sure that there is a robust mix of unit sizes distributed evenly throughout the building. And you'll see that there is indeed a rear yard to the project, which we intend to build for the benefit of the tenancies. And that is our presentation, but certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard, for your presentation. So actually, we have several questions for you. So the first question deals with the conditional approval by Community Board 4 in terms of providing more units at 30 and 40% AMI and to seek HPD funding. So I just talk about the steps that you've taken to comply with the conditional approval of CB4.
Sure, I think Getst Obsfeld, also part of the development team, is going to respond.
Okay.
Sure, we've held a number of meetings and shared underwriting with HPD and HDC over the past several years. And it's our intent to build 100% affordable housing, and the limits of HPD and HDC's subsidy is where we've gotten to. We've generated as many affordable units, as many units at the 40%, 60 and 60% level as HPD is willing to provide subsidy for. So we are always looking for the most subsidy that we can, so we can keep rents as low as possible. And right now, this is the most affordable that this project or any project in the city can go without additional subsidy. And this is where HPD and HDC fall in the kind of subsidy level they're willing to provide to make this project work. So we're continuing to work with HPD as they refine and revise their term sheets, their program underwriting requirements, so that when they come out with their new term sheets, we'll see if there's going to be any change to how much subsidy they're willing to provide to these projects, and whether they're willing to provide a deeper subsidy to reach more lower income levels. But right now, what we've shown you is as far as HPD is willing to go.
So I want to suggest that at the top end of your affordability level, like the 130% AMIs and the numbers just below that, those aren't numbers the community's likely going to benefit from, right? So the goal is to get as many units into that realm where the 50% local preference is met. So if you had more units lifted into the 130 category, taken out of, say, I can't remember the chart, whether it's 110 or whatever the numbers were, that would allow you to get enough cash flow to bring some more units down into, say, the 60 category as a way to, so it's still the same collection of rent, but moving around product to have a little bit more at the higher end so you could have a little bit more at the lower end.
I think the problem with that when discussing those with HDC is that the rents at the higher level are really above the current market in that community. And so we don't want to have rents that are, while they're maybe 100% affordable on a citywide median income basis, if they're not within the market of that community, then the units will sit there and not get rented. So we want to make sure that the whole project is rentable, that it's below market or at most at market and not above the market.
So again, even if you think more units at 130 is not good for you, looking at the tiers you have above 60, taking the tier above 60 and moving it up to the next tier but not going up to 130 might allow you to take some of that same tier and bring some down to 60.
It might, and I think we're going to have to wait until HPD issues a new term sheet to know exactly what their, because the higher you go, the less subsidy they provide, as you know, and so there's a balance, and we're all for increasing the numbers at below 60% of median, as long as the numbers pencil out. We're happy to do so. The issue is simply making sure the numbers pencil out.
Well, again, taking a look at those things as you play this ULURP process out, you know, something to stay on top of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you. I want to go back, I guess, to the slide I think, Annie, you were presenting on in terms of the income range. I guess I couldn't really see it that well in terms of the distribution units by size. Let's go back.
Okay, so I don't know if my presentation is still available. Would you like me to run through the proposed unit distribution?
Yes, that'd be great, yes.
Great, okay. So 10% of the units will be studios, and that would be 9 units. 35% of the units will be 1-bedrooms, and that will be 33 1-bedrooms. 40% of the units will be 2-bedrooms, which is 38 units. 15% of the units will be 3-bedroom, and that's 14 units. And there'll be 1 supers unit, which we have allocated to a 3-bedroom unit. And so again, 55% of those units are family sized with 2- and 3-bedroom unit sizes.
That was helpful, thank you. So the next question deals with the strategies. I know you talked about conversations with the affordable housing agent. Can you specifically talk about the strategy used for the tenant selection process?
The tenant selection process is very carefully designed by the city when you receive their funding for a project, and they have very strict guidelines for tenant selection. In fact, all of the units in the project, because it's 100% affordable, must be applied for by lottery. And I'm not clear about what percentage the city will require in terms of set-asides for community board. We're happy to go along with that, but the city basically makes the decision, not us, about what percentage of set-asides or community preference there will be. And they have very strict guidelines of how that lottery, the applicants through the lottery are selected. And we simply have to follow the city's guidelines for tenant selection. That doesn't mean that we plan on hiring a local organization, whether it's Riseborough or some of the other local organizations that are already certified to do tenant selection. And we'll be working with them to make sure that the community knows about these the availability of apartments, so that people in the community have a shot at putting their name in the lottery and for these apartments, so that they can flood our lottery with their names. That's the plan. But ultimately, the names get selected through a lottery, and we have to follow the city's guidelines in terms of community preference.
So as a follow-up to that, in terms of marketing strategy, have you looked at a financial literacy campaign to start off with?
That is also something that we would ask the local community sponsor that would be doing the marketing, that they also provide financial literacy. And so we would be selecting an organization that has that capacity and that is certified to do that kind of financial literacy.
And the next question, would there be any restrictions to ensure occupancy by maker businesses?
So this is a really good question, and indeed sort of why it has taken us 6 years to get to this point in large part. So we've been working directly with the council member and city planning to come up with a mechanism to keep the manufacturing building manufacturing. And of course, we feel like it came up, the process came up with the most elegant solution, which is, although we're creating an MX district to allow for the affordable housing building, for the creation of affordable housing, we're keeping the manufacturing building manufacturing. We took lots of twists and turns, and city planning ultimately decided that that was the most seamless way to ensure that the current manufacturing building remains manufacturing. Obviously, we're enlarging it to allow for more manufacturing, but the manufacturing building would remain under M1 zoning and enforced as currently enforced by the city. I think it is just, again, important to note that the building itself, as noted, has been tenanted by light manufacturing tenants for the last 20 years under the ownership of Matt and Getz, and intends to follow that course in the future. Matt and Getz signed long-term leases with tenants, typically 15 years, so that they can allow for the infrastructure build out that manufacturing tenants need to operate successfully over the long term. And that is something, once you tour the building, which the community and city planning done, is quite evident in the current building as the current manufacturing. Obviously, one of the things that the community has spoken about in the past is things like not allowing for hotel use on the site, which is obviously something we have no intention of doing and are committed to ensuring does not happen at this site.
And so how will those restrictions be enforced?
So it's a manufacturing building, and it'll be enforced through zoning, the zoning requirements for an M1 building. That the manufacturing building will be in M1, it won't be in the MX district. It'll just be in the manufacturing, so as is currently enforced by the city.
So M1 allows full retail, pretty wide range of retail, and full office rights. So those are allowed as a right. So the zoning in itself doesn't exactly achieve that objective. But one of the things you mentioned about the leases, if you could get something in writing to us to explain how many years are left on various leases, how many square feet assigned to leases, whatever you're comfortable making as a public submission, because certainly leases require to either be bought out or they're there. So there may be other mechanisms as well for oversight that would also help ensure during the out years. Plus you have the space not built, and when that gets occupied, there are no leases for it. So how does that not become higher value office spaces if you're talking about not having it be that way? What makes that the case?
Just to give you a little history of the building, when we when we first encountered it about 20 years ago, the building had been vacant for, I'm not sure how many years, at least 5 years, if not 10. And it was literally an abandoned type of a building. It had been used for beverage sale, not sales, but beverage, a beverage company owned it. And it was a single use building. So when we acquired it, we repositioned it, redesigned it so that we created loft spaces, modest sized loft spaces, anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 square feet. Each one was able to be operated independently because that's the kind of manufacturers that existed then and still exist in Bushwick. Loft tenants that needed that modest size space. A lot of garment knitwear kind of people in those days, some food preparation types of companies, and furniture, woodworking type of people. Those were the kind of users that existed then, and we redesigned the building to fit that kind of a user. And those are the users that we still have today, and those are the users that we would expect to continue to use it both in the existing space and the new space that we're creating. That's the kind of user that is appropriate for that kind of building, for that, for the spaces that we created, and that's what we think would continue.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go to the next question. The next question is regarding the proposed enlargement of the existing industrial building. And what is the time frame for this component of the project?
Yeah, so really, as you know all too well, there's not a lot of new manufacturing space being built in New York City. And so the only way that we can make this overall underwriting work for the overall project is to have simultaneous construction. So there's one job super, there's one construction manager, there's one construction endeavor. And so it's not only meant to be simultaneous, it sort of needs to be simultaneous in order for us to take advantage of economies of scale for the overall project. So again, not just meant to be, but sort of the way it works is if it's a simultaneous construction on the manufacturing and residential portions of the project.
And the second part to that, what ensures that the building will be retained and enlarged independent of the proposed residential development?
I'm gonna get you on a top of that.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
So it's part B of the first part in terms of the time frame of the project. So what ensures that the building would be retained and enlarged independently of the proposed development?
I think Annie really said it well, that we need to do the project at one time. So it really doesn't work very well to build the two parts of the project, the residential and the manufacturing, separately, just because the economies of scale would make it too expensive. And so our intent, our plan, is to build both at the same time. As soon as we can get into the ground with the residential, that's about the same time that we would be getting into the ground, or at least putting that addition onto the manufacturing. The architectural timing, the financing timing would go concurrently with the two aspects of the project, and marketing as well.
I would just, one of the things that we decided not to share with you, just in the interest of time this evening, is a little bit more about who we are as developers. And so I think particularly for Matt and Getz, you'll see that, had we had the community presentation, we really do walk through Matt and Getz's very long-standing commitment to affordable housing, both in the local community and surrounding. And Joe, in my experience building industrial spaces in New York City. Sadly, we choose not to dive into that now, but collectively, we have, decades and decades of experience building both affordable housing and manufacturing spaces, which is how we sort of came together on this project. I think our collective histories of developing in New York City would also support our execution of this project as defined this evening.
So the Borough President's policy to promote renewable and sustainable energy. So what steps have you taken to work with possibly NYSERDA or NYPA to incorporate, stormwater runoff, DEP rain gardens, things of that nature?
Well, so the building itself obviously complies with EGC standards, which you guys know very well. And although we're in the early stages, we are indeed eager to start working on exploring stormwater retention measures, as you've discussed. We're just a little bit early to do that, but certainly at a minimum, we'll comply with Enterprise Green Community standards.
And my last question, the Borough President is always interested in maximizing good quality jobs. So if someone could talk about what steps you're taking to work with MWBEs or local businesses in the process of construction on this site.
That you want to tackle that?
Sure. Well, as you probably know, as a 100% affordable housing project funded by HPD, we have a mandatory requirement of 25% of all the work being done by certified M and WBE companies. And in the thousands of units that we've renovated, we've always at least met, if not exceeded, we almost always exceed that 25% requirement. And so there's no change here. We would expect to exceed that requirement of 25%. And in addition, we work with local community organizations to advertise the availability of positions and promote local hiring. This is not the first project we've done in Bushwick. We've developed 3 schools with the Board of Education where we had a high percentage of local hiring, and it was not even required there. We've also, Achiever Development has built for Riseboro, a number of senior housing projects in that area. Together, Matt and I have developed 2 and 3 family homes for sale homes through the New York City Partnership Program in Bushwick, all of them meeting or exceeding our goals for local hiring and minority and women business enterprises. So this project will be a continuation of that 30-year history, 30 and 40-year history of local hiring and MWBE hiring.
Thank you. Actually, that concludes my questions. Thank you again, Annie, Richard, and Getz for your presentation. Ina, are there any questions? Not questions, actually, anyone that wants to testify in the chat?
I see no indication of anyone who would like to testify on this item.
Okay. Hearing none, Richard, will you close this calendar item?
Calendar item number 1 is closed. Calendar item number 2, 210049ZMK, 210051ZAK, 210056 LDK.
These applications submitted by 300 Huntington Street LLC pursuant to sections 197-C and 201 of the New York City Charter for a set of actions involving a block of Gowanus Canal bounded by Huntington, 9th and Smith Streets. The applicant seeks a zoning map amendment to change the zoning district from M2-1 to M2-3. A chairperson certification for waterfront public access and visual corridors, and authorizations to modify waterfront public access area requirements for grade changes, plantings, screening buffers, fences, and tree pits. Such actions would facilitate the construction of nearly 100,000 square foot manufacturing and commercial building at 300 Huntington Street and a public esplanade along the adjacent portion of the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn Community District 6. Community Board 6 voted to approve this application on December 9th, 2020. Would Eric Bath, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Eric Bath, Planning and Development Specialist with Goldman Harris.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thanks for allowing us to speak on this matter. You could pull up the presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to be joined by our design team, Bill Stein from Datner Architects and Gina Worth from Scape Landscape Design. Next slide, please. So a brief introduction. I'm sure all of you are aware of the Gowanus Canal, about 1.5 miles as it cuts through downtown Brooklyn. The dot in the middle there shows the location of the development site. Next slide, please. Here's a rendering along the Gowanus Canal of the proposed project. You see in the background the 9th Street Smith subway stations, one of the highest elevated subway lines, we believe, in the world. Next slide, please. And now a little background. This application is brought by the owner, Monadnock Construction. Monadnock was founded, it has been in Brooklyn for over 45 years. I believe some of you may know Nick Lembo, who's been a fixture in this neighborhood, including CB6. Monadnock Construction is your classic maker. They are a construction company that makes buildings, and they've been doing so successfully for decades. They're proud to say that they've developed over 15,000 units of affordable housing. And we'd like to note that this construction of affordable housing has continued through the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the examples of projects you may have heard, they have a Carmel Place was the New York City's first micro-unit building. They've had entire new neighborhoods. They've done Maya Spring Creek and campus residences, done middle income development in Hunters Point South, also Columbia Terrace and Columbia Street and CB6. So you see Monadnock is an important and vital piece of Brooklyn's heritage here. Next slide, please. So Monadnock has a couple of needs. They have a current headquarters on 3rd Street that they're looking to keep within the neighborhood. They employ about 250 at their 3rd Street location, 250 people. Or sorry, 80 people are at the headquarters, but they employ 250 people out of those offices. What they want to do is expand. So they've identified a site along the Gowanus for a proposed 6-story, 100,000 square feet building. They're going to occupy a portion of the new building as headquarters. It's not only going to have their shop and it's going to have a continue, but it's also going to have their offices. There will be space in the building for light manufacturing uses and a cross-section of other uses. They're going to have, as we'll see in the renderings, they're going to have ground floor retail, including restaurant spaces that really activate the Gowanus Canal and make it a vital and exciting new waterfront. And this is part of, in keeping with the Gowanus rezoning, which we'll discuss shortly. Next slide, please. So here's a good overview. You can see at the right upper right, you can see Monadnock's existing headquarters, so they're not moving too far. But I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. There's the white dash dotted line, which represents the Gowanus rezoning area. This site is immediately adjacent to and outside of the Gowanus rezoning area, and it's in an IBZ, whereas the rest of the Gowanus rezoning is not. The blue dash line indicates the IBZ. And you can also see the development site is shown in yellow, which is a portion of the rezoned area, which is shown in a dotted red line. Next slide, please. So this area is what we like to consider transit rich. In addition to being located directly beneath a subway line, the GF line, there are also plenty of bus lines in the vicinity, as well as bike routes, pedestrian opportunities. Once the Gowanus plan comes into effect, the entire waterfront will be activated for pedestrian use. And this Monadnock site, though not part of the Gowanus plan, will serve as the gateway to this vital and exciting esplanade as it runs through a newly cleaned up and dredged Gowanus Canal. Next slide, please. So here are some site photos for context. On the upper left-hand corner, you can see in the yellow, that's the site. It's actually currently used for bus storage. I think you can see some of the buses in some of those photos. On the bottom lower left-hand corner, you'll see they just replaced the bulkhead. It's a sheet pile bulkhead that's newly refurbished, and work continues on the bulkhead at the end of Huntington Street. But Monadnock Construction has proactively replaced the bulkhead along their site. So again, you can see in the photo, the dashed red line is the rezoning area, and the yellow is the development site where the 100,000 square foot building headquarters is proposed. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the zoning. The zoning is currently an M21 medium manufacturing / industrial district. It has an FAR of 2, maximum building height is 110 feet. And the parking is based on a rather onerous requirement of square footage for the use or the number of employees, whichever is the lesser. So due to these parking requirements, it pretty much makes the development site impossible to develop, because not only is there, in an as-of-right scenario with 100,000 square feet of floor area, there would be approximately 242 spaces for a project of this size. And it's important to note that no below-grade parking is feasible here because of the high water table. And above-ground parking, of course, would in the exterior, it would take up the construction yard, which is vital to Monadnock's business. And if it's put inside the building, it would raise the building to be too high along the Gowanus Canal and would put it up against the height restriction. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning. We propose to make a very moderate change from an M21 to an M23. An M23 district actually has all the same bulk controls. The only effect it's going to have here is to eliminate parking requirements. Next slide, please. So the FAR of an M21, the existing zoning is 2, maximum height 110 feet, and we discussed the owner's parking requirement. The proposed M23 has an FAR of 2, the same FAR, same height restriction, and no parking requirements. It's also, if you look historically at where these M23 districts were zoned, they were zoned along waterfronts, traditionally in Manhattan. So it's actually a very suitable zoning district for not only this area, but also for an IBZ. Next slide, please. So here's again the rendering showing the proposed building. And you'll see that this does show the sheet pile bulk been newly installed. Let's go ahead one slide, please. And now I'd like to introduce, if he's available to speak, the architect, Bill Stein. He's with Datner Architects, and he can take you through his design of the building. Bill, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Eric. My name is Bill Stein. I'm an architect with Datner Architects. We are the architects for the building in association with Bernheimer Architecture. As you can see from the previous slide, the rendering, the building will be predominantly a brick building with the lower 3 floors, an attractive red brick, and the upper setback 3 floors, a dark gray brick. Sort of intersecting volumes in an L-shaped configuration that fronts both on Huntington Street and on the public access esplanade, and frames the contractor's yard so that it's not visible from Huntington Street and from the public. Some of the sustainability features of this building will include high performance mechanical systems, high performance energy efficient LED lighting, a highly insulated building envelope with high performance windows, stormwater control, and green roof elements on the roof of the building, which you see in this diagram. We understand that a question has come up about the possibility of rooftop agriculture. We have a significant amount of mechanical equipment on the roof and anticipate more equipment to serve needs of tenants in the building, as well as having the rooftop on the 6th floor become a occupied floor would trigger high-rise construction requirements of the building code, such as extending elevators to the roof, providing an emergency generator, a auxiliary radio communication system, and other features which would be disproportionately expensive for the construction of this project. The building will have retail space on the ground floor, likely including a restaurant at the corner of Huntington where it meets the esplanade, overlooking the canal. Monadnock will occupy approximately a third of the building, as well as the contractor's yard, with the remainder of the building being leased out. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Gina Worth from Scape Landscape Design.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Eric. And thank you for the whole team for your consideration this evening. The landscape design at Huntington is truly designed to provide public access to the waterfront. There are clear visual and physical sightlines down to the water, extending from Huntington Street. So a member of the public can simply walk safely along the sidewalk and get to the water's edge. The project is designed fully in compliance with the city's waterfront zoning requests, a couple of additional requests at the end of this presentation. But if you're familiar with these recommendations from waterfront zoning, you will see that we have fully met the intent and the spirit of the waterfront zoning and esplanade design requirements here, providing a large and generous public pathway that extends along the water, providing multiple types of seating, both fixed and movable within this area, including ADA seating for people with disabilities, and multiple places for social seating and encounters. We've also worked very hard with city planning to design a couple of very special and creative features within this project. The first is the connectivity aspect. We've designed in connection to parcels both north and south of the site, imagining and anticipating both the rezoning to the north and potential future connection below the Smith and 9th Street Bridge to the south. So while this is truly a gateway to the larger Gowanus Esplanade network, it's a key piece of that system. And this project is about connectivity as much as it's about place and destination. We've designed in a special feature called the Lifted Grove, which you can see here in this bubble zoom that shows a quick perspective of this area. This is really a gesture back towards the industrial history of both this site and the greater region. A constructed arbor made of an industrial trellis system that hosts native vines and native plants and provides a shady canopy underneath which to sit and enjoy the canal. And at the street end, we designed a series of seating areas and gathering areas that encourage neighborhood residents and visitors to sit and linger along the edges of the canal that step down towards the canal, enhancing visual access to the water, and created large, generous planting beds that capture and treat stormwater, some of which can be seen in the next slide itself there. And so the intent of this space is to create a very unique stormwater planted area that reflects and highlights sites of and vegetation types of the historic ecological fabric of the Gowanus and helps manage stormwater within the site itself. We also have a pedestrian surface in this zone, which is a metal grate, so people can see through and see that process of stormwater moving within the system here. In general, this site is a very unique piece along the canal. It's directly adjacent to this waterfront retail and restaurant space that Bill mentioned, and will really create an active and thriving destination along the canal. Next slide. When we zoom out and look at the greater site and think about both the stormwater and resilience parameters of site design, Bill already mentioned the series of green roofs that line the rooftop, which help absorb stormwater. Stormwater running off the contractor's yard is collected in a fully separate system that has a new permitted outfall to the Gowanus Canal, where that handles any overload coming from the existing planting areas or paved areas of the contractor's yard. So this project is not contributing any stormwater to the combined sewer system, which is of great benefit for the water quality of the canal itself. Next slide. And this image here speaks both to the active civic life that is designed for along the edge of the canal, these places to sit, to linger, to be with community, to enjoy active neighborhood retail adjacent to the canal, to sit in the lifted grove, to walk along the perimeter pathway, and to look at the iconic Smith and 9th Street Bridge in the distance. The other element that you can see in this rendering is the stepped and sloped nature of the site. The site is higher on the right than it is on the left. It intentionally steps and slopes down towards the water. This is a move to make the site more resilient, to lift the majority of the site outside of the future flood zone, and to have any areas that are within the future flood zone to be planted and part of these ecological terraces as shown in the foreground. This planting bed along the perimeter of the site also kind of captures some of the industrial and kind of ephemeral qualities of the canal today, with planting spilling over the edges of the bulkhead. So we're trying to preserve that in the design. Next slide. And I'll speak very briefly on a couple of requested authorizations for the waterfront public access area that enable these creative design solutions and slight modifications to the waterfront zoning framework. In order to keep the site design resilient, but also step down to the water's edge, we needed to slightly modify the maximum grade change permitted in order to reduce flooding on the site and enable this resilient site design. So that is one of our first requests. We have also requested to reduce the minimum planting area requirement, and that is to enable the zone of more active area that's directly connected to the active building frontage, but also the active esplanade around. So we're trying to create more space for people, for the public to linger and sit within this space. We have some technical requirements here requesting to waive the minimum dimensions for the openings of single tree pits, which also allows for more active space along the canal, as does the modified screening buffer request here that enables the visual grove to have the lifted grove to have strong visual connectivity to the areas around it. Finally, we have requested to increase the maximum height fencing to ensure visitor safety along the Esplanade and to the train bridge to the south. And I think I'll pass it back to Eric to speak on the last request.
Great, thanks so much, Gina and Bill. If you could go ahead, one more slide. Oh, that must be our conclusion. Well, then let me summarize. As stated before, there are 3 actions in front of you. One is a rezoning from M21 to M23 manufacturing district. There's a certification for a waterfront public access area. And with it, as Gina described, there are 5 authorizations to deviate from the controls of the zoning resolution with respect to those waterfront public access areas. We also want to emphasize that many of these changes that we're seeking are consistent and indeed encouraged in the waterfront access plan for the Gowanus waterfront, which Gina and Scape are well involved. So it was a blessing to have her on this job as well. And in conclusion, I do want to talk about, before we get it to the question and answer session, I just want to clarify some of the employment data. There will be approximately 1,045 jobs produced directly, indirectly, and induced from this relocation of the headquarters, including, of course, over the 2-year construction period, there's going to be 330 construction-related jobs. It's important to note that there are jobs that are related to the brownfield cleanup program and some of the other conservation efforts to improve the Gowanus Canal and make it a vital and cherished resource for the community. And in the end, Monadnock expects about 715 permanent jobs to be created indirectly that are transit accessible and within the IBZ, which we know is a very important goal to maintain those jobs in the IBZ. So in conclusion, we want to thank you for your consideration and thank you for joining us late at night to discuss. So we'd be happy to hear any questions you might have.
Thank you, Eric, Gina, and Bill for your presentation today. So the first question, in eliminating a costly parking requirement, the developer would benefit from greater economic feasibility to realize the maximum floor area, though this would trigger a financial obligation to create a canal side promenade. So what was the projected cost savings of not providing the required parking? And go ahead.
Well, I'm going to take the first pass at this question, and I'm going to open it up to the owner, who's also on the call, Zach Longmore. But it's important to note, as we emphasized in our presentation, that without this parking waiver, without the elimination of parking, this project would not be able to happen at this site. For all the reasons I outlined before, the parking makes it not only not feasible, but it makes it it would make Monadnock Construction have to either stay in their current headquarters or seek another development site. So to put a cost on the parking, now there was some estimates that it would take approximately $150 a square foot for the parking, and if you calculate about 300 square feet per space, that results in a very high number for 240 parking spaces, approximately 10 million. The cost of constructing the bulkhead and esplanade, in addition to those costs, there's also environmental remediation. There's street improvements of the end of Huntington Street. There's sewage infrastructure, a fire department turnaround, paving. And so this job includes a lot of improvements that will benefit the community. And we know that the esplanade alone costs about approximately $3 million, I believe. And then the site remediation, approximately $800,000. But if I could invite Zach Longmore to address this question further and make sure I've I haven't left out any of the issues. Zach, are you available?
Yeah. Hi, Eric. Thank you. I think you covered most of it. I think just big picture, it's not a 1-for-1 as far as the savings from not doing the parking to public benefit because the project's not feasible with the parking. So I think that's pretty much it.
I don't know, maybe I missed it. So what is the expected cost obligation of providing the waterfront public access area?
We're assuming $3 million for the Esplanade and the bulkhead, which was already built.
Okay. Okay. So the second question, in addition to the canal side amenity, would there be any commitment to provide additional public benefit as below market rate space for like an arts or cultural institution?
Well, I'm going to also bring in Tom McMahon, a lobbyist, to discuss this issue. But first, I do want to clarify a zoning issue. Unfortunately, in a manufacturing district, we are not able to provide community facility uses, including arts programs. But to speak to our negotiations with the council member, Brad Lander, Tom McMahon, are you available to address that issue?
I'm available to address the issue, but I think the question is on specific community benefits that the project will provide. We've been negotiating with Councilman Lander over another issue that you raised, which is the permanency of long-term light industrial in that building, and that's an ongoing conversation that we're working on. But in terms of the additional community amenities, there is a commitment to try to maintain, working space there, as Monadnock is. Monadnock is an industrial company, and with an industrial base and create jobs. The amenities, I mean, that's something that is an ongoing challenge given the level of investment that Monadnock is making for both the Esplanade, for the sewer work, for the water retention, for the green roof, and the other environmental benefits that come with the project.
Okay. So the next question, another method to provide such beneficial space is through non-zoning floor areas such as open or enclosed rooftop agriculture. So would it be feasible to incorporate such use in the development? And what consideration has been given to this idea?
I'm going to hand that one over to Bill Stein to reiterate some of the points. Bill?
Yeah, I tried to address this in the presentation, but just to go over it again, we do have green roof areas on the roof of the building in accordance with local laws 92 and 94, and we strongly support these sustainable features. Rooftop agriculture, though, introduces other elements. Firstly, and maybe most importantly, we have very limited areas of green roof because there's a significant amount of mechanical equipment on the roof, both for the base building as well as for the operations of tenants. So limited amount of green roof area that's available. Some of it is shaded by the roof bulkhead for the stair and elevator bulkhead. Secondly, by making, if rooftop agriculture becomes an occupied space on the roof, and once this is occupied space, it triggers the building becoming what's called in the building code a high-rise building, which triggers a number of very expensive features, including the requirement to extend the elevator to the roof to provide accessibility, provide an emergency generator for the entire building, and to provide a auxiliary radio communication system, which is required by code for high-rise buildings. These are important safety features in tall towers, but are disproportionately expensive for a relatively low-rise building like this. We do plan on having the potential for planting in the green roof of pollinator-type plants to enhance and encourage the natural life surrounding the Gowanus Canal. But we did look at the idea of rooftop agriculture and felt that in this particular location for this particular project, it's not really feasible.
If you could add, like, how much lower in stories or height would the building have to be to not trigger the high-rise conditions that you described?
Richard, it would have to be 1 story lower.
Thank you.
And as a follow-up to what you were speaking on in terms of the stormwater runoff, has there been any consideration to work with NYSERDA or NYPA in incorporating passive house design?
Let me, can I open that up to Sue McCoy, Bill, to address that issue? Sue, are you available to speak? She's the civil engineer on this project.
Yes, I'm here. I think that question, though, was the NYSERDA or NYPA was more of a building-related question, because we have our a new on-site outfall. All the stormwater, as Gina had mentioned earlier, all the stormwater will be collected on site and then treated prior to distribution to the outfall. Along the waterfront, there are some rain gardens that'll be capturing the water and filtering it, and then any excess will be taken to the outfall. In terms of any other credits for the building, though, I think I might have to punt it back to you, Bill, because I don't think we talked about any reuse within the building.
Well, Tonya, you
I just want
mentioned.
to add, in terms of Huntington and rain gardens, is it possible that the extent of the rain gardens could go out towards Smith Street?
That will all be subject to DEP and what they'll allow within the street. They're fairly rigid in what they will allow within the public right of way. We definitely would do anything that they would encourage, but as of now, any rain gardens need to have a maintenance entity, and it's a fairly rigorous process to get that approved. But I think I defer to Zach, but we probably would entertain anything that they would look for. The street stormwater is being handled separately from the on-site, and so that's all subject to the DEP and EPA and DEC approval process.
I think having that conversation with DEP over the remainder of the ULURP process would be enlightening.
That's something we can certainly do as we file our building filings with them.
And the last question actually deals with maximizing good quality jobs. So what consideration has been given to include, MWBE or local business enterprises on construction?
So Zach Longmore, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So we are anticipating applying for high cap for this project, and it's of a size. It comes with MWBE outreach component to it. That's something we have a lot of experience doing on our other development projects, and we're well versed in it and plan on pursuing that for this project as well.
Yeah, and a personal note, the two of the groups on the call, both Scape and Goldman Harris, are woman-owned business enterprises.
So thank you. That concludes my questions for this evening, and thanks again for your presentation.
Thanks so much for having us.
Sure. So again, if anyone would like to testify, you must indicate it by using the WebEx chat function. Ina, do we have anyone that would like to testify?
We have no one who has indicated intent to speak.
Okay. Hearing none, Richard, if you can close this calendar item.
Calendar item number 2 is closed. Calendar item number 3, 210138 ZMK.
Apologies, it appears we have one person who wishes to speak.
Okay.
At least one person. Okay. Our first speaker is Sebastian Heath.
Yes, I'm now unmuting myself. My name is Sebastian Heath. I'm a resident up on Dean Street. I'm a regular visitor to the Gowanus Canal, and I'm a user of it by way of canoeing on it. And I was happy to see in the renderings that there were canoes and kayaks on it. But I do note that the proposal that's currently proposed has no direct water access to the canal itself. And I am hoping that in return for the very substantial changes to zoning, that the developer would be willing to provide a form of that. I think you guys are next to the Second Street put in right now, the floating dock that's used by Gowanus Dredgers. I'm a member, but I hardly speak for them as well. But the Gowanus Canal, it's like a park, and right now it only has one entrance, and it would be fantastic that in return for the substantial changes, you enabled more use of that really facility. It's also very respectful of the historic active use of it as a waterway, rather than just something that people walked by, but that was used. And again, I note that you put that in your renderings, and it would be great to like increase the demand by providing access. So thank you very much for again listening to me, but I hope that it's something that can be acted upon.
Terrific input. Thank you, Sebastian.
Our next speaker is Owen Foote.
Yes, we hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Your volume's low, but we could hear you.
Okay. I am so sorry. It's been a difficult. I wanted to a great player and support, bringing an act and thriving. I want to echo those great.
Mr. Foote, you're breaking up. Can you repeat your?
Well, for those canoeists and kayakers that are visiting, potentially to patronize the restaurant, or they cannot get there because there is no.
You're cutting in and out.
All right, I'm going to say it in a few different ways. And participate. We'll get a canoe.
You may want to try this. You may want to try this on a phone line, or you may want to email us your testimony, because we're getting like half of what you're saying. We're only getting part of what you're saying. So if you may want to try this on a phone line, or if you want to email us your testimony.
Oh. If
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brad Vogel.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. We hear you fine.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My name is Brad Vogel, and I am the captain of the Gowanus Dredgers Canoe Club. We've been operating on the Gowanus Canal for over 20 years. And we know that Monadnock is a good neighbor. They are right across 2nd Street from our current boathouse. And we would encourage the borough president this evening to require as a condition of his approval of this ULURP application the inclusion of water access on the site. And by that, I mean the ability for watercraft users such as canoeists and kayakers and small boaters to get in and out of the water safely with either a dock or a landing. And I raise this issue particularly because, as everyone has seen who's gone along the Gowanus Canal in recent weeks and months, the canal is increasingly lined with a sheer steel wall of new bulkheads. And that makes it increasingly difficult for people who fall into the water, whether that's from a canoe, whether that's from the land, or whether that's from a bridge, to get them out of the water safely. And the spot at the end of Huntington Street is a great and natural place to include real water access. And we encourage the borough president to include this as a condition of approval. And we would encourage the developer to look at the model of the dock that we currently have at the end of 2nd Street in Gowanus as a precedent and as a way to include this in the site. Thank you very much.
I believe we have no further speakers.
Richard, if you would proceed with calendar number 3.
Okay, yes, calendar item number 2, closed. Calendar item number 3, 210138 ZMK, 210139 ZSK.
These applications submitted by RP Inlet LLC pursuant to sections 197-C and 201 of the New York City Charter for a zoning map amendment to change a block bounded by Messerol and Wythe Avenues and Banker, Gem, and North 15th Streets from M3-2 to M1-5, as well as a large-scale development special permit by the City Planning Commission to permit such development to exceed applicable height and setback requirements. These actions are requested to facilitate a mixed-use building with approximate 488,500 square feet of commercial space, including office and retail, and 95,300 square feet of industrial space to accommodate the continued operation of Acme Smokefish as the first phase of intended construction of 30 Gem Street in Brooklyn Community District 1. Community Board 1 approved this application with conditions on December 8th, 2020. Would Jeff Fronek, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Yes, hi. My name is Jeff Fronek. I'm the Director of Investments and Director of the New York Metro Market for Rubenstein Partners. Thank you very much for having us. So we'll begin the presentation now. So good evening, everyone. We appreciate the opportunity to present this proposal, which embodies the very best of Brooklyn, past, present, and future. I'm joined here tonight by Adam Kaslow, the great-grandson of the man who founded Acme Smokefish in 1906 and the current co-CEO of the company, as well as Ray Levin of Herrick Feinstein, our land use counsel. If approved, Acme Smokefish, born in this borough some 120 years ago, will have a new home that serves its future and the borough's. The plan is... Sorry?
Next slide, please.
Oh, Okay, sorry, Greg. The plan is based on an innovative solution devised here in Brooklyn with the support of Borough President Adams, and that is now being replicated in other parts of the city, seeking to reverse the decades-long decline in manufacturing. Since the 1950s, hundreds of factories have closed and hundreds of thousands of jobs have been lost. Companies scaled back, moved out, or stopped operating together, but not Acme. Even now, as food processing plants across the country and thousands of businesses in New York are struggling to overcome the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, Acme's employees kept on working, putting food on their families' tables and on ours.
Next slide.
Now to meet the growing demand for its products and comply with current health and safety standards, Acme needs a new next-generation factory that will allow the family-owned business to stay in Brooklyn. But building and operating a factory of this type in New York is cost prohibitive. Now using the innovative mixed-use zoning concept launched here in Brooklyn at 25 Kent, a nearby development that has attracted a garment manufacturer to Brooklyn from Manhattan, we are able to keep Acme in Brooklyn. Further complicating this effort and increasing both its cost and size is the fact that Acme needed to remain in its current facility until its new factory is complete. Moving twice or stopping production are not viable options. And to meet operational needs and regulatory requirements, Acme needed a standalone facility with the ability to install certain elements of the building systems on its roof.
Next slide.
To meet these requirements, the development site was expanded to the entire block, with agreements now in place to relocate all existing uses to all nearby locations. And Acme's new 4-story building will be constructed on the northwest section of the site, closest to the corner of Meserole Avenue and Banker Street.
Next slide.
Once their relocation is complete, demolition of the current facility will commence, and then construction of the remaining component will begin. The design of the new commercial space will minimize impact in a few key ways. First, it will incorporate materials compatible with the existing character of the neighborhood. Second, it will create a pleasant pedestrian experience that includes about half an acre of open space and retail shops intended as amenities to both the neighborhood residents and building tenants. And third, it will complete the building with a glass box that's significantly set back from the brick facade of the base.
Next slide.
The reality is that the commercial component of this plan offers a revenue stream that is absolutely needed to subsidize Acme's new home. The cost of building this new facility is some $40 million, approximately more than ever will be recovered, making a standalone factory economically unachievable. By allowing this proposal to move forward, more than 100 union jobs, many held by Brooklyn residents, will be saved, and a place for more than 2,000 jobs will be created.
Next slide.
Some $550 million in private investment will offer an economic boost that is needed now more than ever. And to be sure that the people closest to the development will benefit, we are partnering with St. Nick's Alliance to provide job training services to neighborhood residents for both the construction of the building and as a service to those companies who lease space in the building and want to tap into the local workforce.
Next slide.
We are also working with Friends of Bushwick Inlet Park and North Brooklyn Parks Alliance to support their efforts, even as we provide about half an acre of open space that will link McCarran Park to the east with the new Waterfront Park to the west once it's built. And now Adam will offer additional details from his perspective on this project.
Next slide, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here this evening. As Jeff mentioned, Acme was started in Brooklyn by my great-grandfather, Harry Brownstein, in 1906. He began his career in smoked fish as what was known as a wagon jobber. He had a horse-drawn wagon. He would go out buy smoked fish from different smokehouses throughout Brooklyn and Queens, and had himself a little sales route. His dream was to one day have his own smokehouse, and was able to achieve that in the 50s with Acme Smoked Fish at our same spot in Brooklyn. Now we are one of Brooklyn's best known brands, delivering high quality smoked seafood to hundreds of restaurants, bagel stores, appetizing shops, retailers in the New York metro area and beyond. We've been fortunate to grow substantially over the past 60 years, and now have a number of plants up and down the East Coast. Even as I'm speaking, we have plans to build a distribution center in New Jersey, and opened a smokehouse in Wilmington, North Carolina about 5 years ago. But Brooklyn is still our home. It's a big part of who we are and what we do. But staying in Brooklyn has some challenges. Our plant has kind of expanded internally on this block over the years, and the limited capacity in an outdated plant is an ongoing issue. Advances in
Next slide, please.
Advances in food safety increase costs and kind of make our configuration a little bit inefficient, and stretch the capabilities of an aging facility. The level of investment that's required to upgrade this existing facility is cost prohibitive, and so we've kind of put patches on our existing site with hope that it'll last a little while longer. Out-of-state locations offer other efficient solutions, but our family wants to stay in Brooklyn. Like I said, it's a big part of who we are, not just of our brand, but of our corporate identity. The biggest hurdle that we've encountered is trying to meaningfully upgrade our facility without disrupting our existing operation is impossible. With trying to juggle food safety regulations and in a construction zone is not going to happen. So a mutual friend introduced me to Jeff, and over the past several years, we've been working with his team to devise a economically feasible and operationally viable plan for a new Acme home. We know we need this, and we want to stay in Brooklyn, but we couldn't do this on our own. I'm in the smoked fish business, not in the real estate development business, and we needed a partnership for this plan.
Next slide, please.
The key to why this particular plan works so great for Acme is we've devised a way that will allow us to continue operations in our existing site as the new facility is being constructed. Once the 4-story freestanding building is finished, we move into that site, and the rest of the development site will be available for the second phase of the development. We've spent a lot of time using some advanced systems to ensure that this building will be safe, neighborhood compatible, and environmentally sustainable. In total, we'll be able to expand our manufacturing capacity, expand our manufacturing footprint by about 40% to a total of 95,000 square feet. But I expect that square footage to be much better utilized to allow us a runway for long-term growth.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. So just to take you on a quick tour of the proposed layout across 4 floors. On ground level, which is known as the first floor, we'll be able to receive raw material, fish, ingredients, and supplies from the street. Have fish go through our smoking process, which includes storage, thawing, then brining, which is the process of adding salt to fish. The product would then be brought up on a freight elevator to the third floor, where we will complete the smoking process with both cold smoking and hot smoking, and our company will terminate kind of on the left side, where they will go back down to the corporate offices, and employee welfare will be on the fourth floor, and we hope this will be our headquarters for generations to come. The last thing I wanted to note was at the community board hearing 2 weeks ago, we heard an outpouring of support from many people in the community who spoke in favor of our plan, and others who expressed some concern about the proposal and our current operation. Like I said, we want to stay in Brooklyn. It's our home. It's part of our identity, and we want to continue to be a good neighbor for the next generation to come. So we are happy to continue a conversation about strengthening our community partnerships that have served us and our neighbors for well over 100 years. Thank you.
Next slide, please.
Good evening. My name is Raymond Levin. I'm with the law firm of Herrick Feinstein. We're land use counsel to RP Inlet. As Jeff mentioned, the mixed use zoning that allows new commercial development to subsidize manufacturing uses was conceived here in Brooklyn and first used for development at 25 Kent Avenue, just a few blocks from this very site. The project is based on that same concept. The new commercial space offsets the cost of creating manufacturing space. In this case, that requires a change in the underlying zoning district and the imposition of restrictions by a special permit that will lock in the proposed plan. Specifically, we're seeking what happened? There we go. So we are seeking a zoning map amendment to change the existing M31 district, which is a 2 FAR, to an M15 district, which is a 5 FAR, and a large-scale general development special permit to allow certain limited height and setback waivers. Those waivers would allow the street wall on portions of Meserole Avenue and Gem Street to rise to 104 feet rather than the standard 85 feet. And at that point, a setback is required, which we will be providing. Also, these changes would, the special permit, I'm sorry, would allow a small portion of the upper 2 floors of the proposed development on Gem Street and Meserole Avenue to penetrate the required sky exposure plane. These changes would allow sufficient clearance above the freestanding factory necessity for Acme to function, and allow for the rational disposition of floor area on the block to ensure the development's financial viability. And I will turn it back to Jeff.
Next slide, please.
Great. Thank you, Ray. So as Adam mentioned, 2 weeks ago, Community Board recommended approval of this plan. There was an overwhelming 2-to-1 margin of that vote, and they also sought to make it better, the plan better with some specific recommendations. And these recommendations really fell into a few categories. One was assurances that Acme space will remain manufacturing. 2, there were several environmentally friendly best practices that the Community Board recommended. 3 was to maintain compliance with all relevant local laws. And 4 was to minimize the impact both of the construction and then the operation of the new factory, as well as the commercial spaces.
You can advance 2 slides, please.
So thanks, Craig. As we took those recommendations, and based on that, we have a few responses. So we agreed to the condition offered by the Community Board that we seek to enter the Industrial Development Agency, or IDA program, which would require the Acme space to be maintained as industrial for a minimum of 25 years. Furthering our acceptance of the board's recommendations, the new development will be fully compliant with any and all local laws, including Local Law 97 of New York City's Climate Mobilization Act, enforcing strict carbon emission targets, coastal flood resiliency and erosion regulations to protect against rising sea levels, as well as Local Law 15 of 2020, which requires bird-friendly materials on at least 90% of the first 75 feet of the building's exterior to reduce collision hazards. And we will also achieve at a minimum LEED Silver certification by incorporating many, if not all, of the committee's recommendations.
Next slide, please.
To ensure the project's benefits stay close to home, which was another of CB1's recommendations, we are in the process of finalizing an agreement with St. Nick's Alliance, which would serve as our partner in providing skills training and job placement services for at least 25 construction laborers, and we'll work with them to devise additional job training and placement programs for potential tenants of the commercial spaces. This will ensure that local residents are fully able to enjoy the economic benefits derived from the development. Finally, we agree fully to the committee's request that Rubenstein meet its obligations to keep the community informed as the development proceeds, and we will work with you and others to develop the appropriate mechanisms and specific scope for a community liaison. Thank you very much.
That conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you so much, Adam, Jeff, and Raymond. So I have about 5 or 6 questions for you. The first, the proposed development lacks the benefit of the zoning special permit that links new multi-story office development to the provision of beneficial industrial space in the adjacent M12 zone. In lieu of such a zoning requirement, what mechanism would ensure that the new Acme facility is maintained as a makerspace?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a topic that we've all been discussing, as well as with the councilman, and we are an active participant and looking for a solution that works for everybody. It seems like the common ground right now is for the project to enter the IDA program that I mentioned, which will require that space that Acme is going to take be preserved as manufacturing. So that seems to be the sort of the path forward on that, and we are active and at the table to come to an agreement and make everyone comfortable on that.
Okay, and the second question, in addition to means to provide beneficial use space through non-zoning floor area, such as open and or enclosed rooftop agriculture, would it be feasible to incorporate such use in development, and what consideration has been given to this idea?
So I think, I'm not sure if Joe Loro is activated as a speaker.
Yeah, I'm in. So the intent, I'm in, Jeff. So the intent is that.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. So my name is Joe Loro. I'm the managing director of Gensler. We're the architects for the project, and with the intent where appropriate, we'd like to look at green roofs for some space, but it would be for the tenant's use where appropriate, and we can develop the green roof for the setbacks.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So nearby residents have expressed a concern about the proposed height. Could you explain what factors preclude a more horizontal massing of the intended bulk?
I think I can start a discussion on this is a very unique project because we're building a space on a portion of the site while the occupant of that space is running their business on the rest of the site. So therefore, the footprint available for the non-factory space is not the whole block. The other factor is that there's specific requirements for venting of this facility, a smokehouse, and so you really can't build anything directly above it. At other projects where manufacturing space is incorporated, you don't have those physical restrictions, and therefore you can take a second or third floor and layer it that way. Probably from Acme's functioning, they would much rather be on 1 or 2 floors rather than 4, but we can't stop their production, so they're going to be built on a portion of the site. The rest of the site will then be cleared, and the building will go up on the remainder of the site, leaving the area above the factory clear for ventilation purposes. The other element of this that constricts the footprint of the building a little bit is that we wanted to create open space on 15th Street and Wyeth, near on the way to the hopefully soon to be built Inlet Park. So that also pushed the building back a little bit. And so the combination of those things are why we ended up with the height that we have. We've set that height back from some of the streets. We've tried our best to sort of move the bulk of that building more towards the center of the block so that when you're walking on the street, it will be less visible. But it is 175, 78 feet tall. And that's why it is. I don't know whether Joe wants to add anything to that, but I guess not.
Joe, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I think you covered it well, Ray. I think getting the Acme facility to work in one move and being able to condense it and sort of fold the operations onto itself required some height, and it required some clarity above the space itself. So I think that was we tried our best to really get that to be as low as possible, but it is really a function of its operations.
So south of the Acme building and on the side of the block where Acme is now, towards the southern end of your building footprint, other than the white, we get the white plaza area, but the building is set in on the upper floors in the southern part of the building. Is there a reason that was the priority instead of going wider out to the street line?
Are you referring to on the south edge? Why did we set the building back? Richard, you're on mute.
Not on Wythe itself, but running north of Wythe, right? You have the upper element, like for example, the retail comes out to the street on Banker. The retail comes, and then some of the office building coming south of Messerol goes out to the street, but then at a certain point it stops and it sets in from the sidewalk. So the office section, floors 2 through whatever height, they're both set in on the Gem and the Banker side. And I'm curious what was motivating those setbacks.
Well, I think what we were trying to do was what we were attempting to do is to make it feel as small scale as possible from the street level. And what we were wrestling with when you get to where we're adjacent to the Acme facility is where there's infrastructure and core and things of that nature that ended up being able to, pushing the building out somewhat. So the idea really was to try and put ourselves in a position where we maintain as much as we could as the zoning street wall would allow for, and set the building back as to try to reduce the visual scale of the building.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Richard, I think there's also a balancing act where we have to make the the floor plates of the ancillary commercial space usable. So, in certain areas that required more depth to the floor plate. And then in other areas, you run into a point where you really, if you make it too deep, then all of a sudden there are these dark middle portions of the floor where there's no light that gets there. And it really is a substandard product.
Thank you, Jeff. So what consideration has been given to set aside a portion of the building for like a local arts institution or a small retail business?
I'm sorry, is it you're asking about setting aside part of the building for
Like a local arts institution or arts group or small business? Retail?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we are currently talking to some, various groups about ways to ensure that the benefits of this project are, captured by the community. But, we're not at the point right now where we're able to set aside or guarantee, that space would be made available. So I think we continue to, explore different options around that. But as our plan is, we would need to maintain flexibility over how that space is used and leased to make the project viable.
Okay. And the next question, I know you touched on this a little bit. So it's the borough president. He's very concerned with promoting renewable and sustainable energy. You did speak about the green roofs. So has there been any consideration to incorporate working with NYSERDA or NYPA to incorporate DEP rain garden?
What was the last part of that? Could you repeat the last part of it? After NYSERDA?
NYPA to incorporate DEP rain gardens. I know you did touch on the green roof.
We haven't engaged.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was going to say we haven't engaged with NYSERDA right now with, directly related to how we're going to deal with energy use. But basically by trade, but with the much more stringent local law 97 rules, our intent is to really meet, to meet the most, the most stringent sort of rules that are apply. But we will certainly look to work in partnership with NYSERDA to make sure that that our energy use is aligned with the city's goals.
Yeah, we also did look at cogeneration on site. Unfortunately, the current regulations and the way that certain, I think the way that certain agencies would look at it didn't make that feasible. Certain things like environmental sustainability and the resiliency of the site are paramount to us. Acme is fronting the Meserole Ave side, so we are particularly sensitive to flood risk and things of that nature. So that's been top of mind as we've gone down the design process. So we feel like we have a very good mitigation plan in place. Although, as Joe mentioned, we're continuing to discuss and liaise with various agencies on that.
And for example, have you looked at things because your height, like wind turbines, and on a street level within the street right away, DEP rain gardens around the site?
Yeah, so we're working with we will be working with the DEP to make sure that all capturing is on site. So the intent is to marry up with with DEP regulations.
But again, the rain gardens are not explicitly about your site. It's also within the street runoff of your 4 surrounding streets.
Yeah, Richard. I mean, the ones that are not only for our site. I mean, we're going to be following what the DEP regulations are. So I'm not sure as it relates to off our site what you're asking. I apologize.
Well, when you're building, for example, your builder's given plan, your sidewalk around curbs, whatever that get reconstructed, there's an opportunity to incorporate rain gardens on that perimeter. So I'm wondering if you're going to have that conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to look into it. Right now, we have not incorporated that into outside of the building perimeter.
And so the last question deals with promoting good quality jobs. So what steps have you taken to incorporate MWBE, local business enterprise for that site?
Yeah, so I think one example to look to was 25 Kent, where we're part of the ICAP program, and we have a good relationship with small business services, and so we intend on doing concerted outreach through SBS to MWB firms to ensure that there's outreach and that they're able to participate in the bidding process for the construction work.
So thank you. That concludes my question. Thank you, Adam, Jeff, Raymond, and Joe.
Okay.
For your
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So I just wanted to remind the viewers, if you would like to testify, you must indicate so in the chat. Ina, do we have anyone that would like to testify?
Yes, starting with Cassandra Carrillo of 32 BJ.
Can you repeat the name, Ina?
Cassandra Carrillo of 32 BJ.
Hi, can you
Cassandra, you're unmuted.
Okay. Good evening.
Yes, we hear you.
Good evening. My name is Cassie Carrillo, and I'm a representative of 32 BJ. I'm here tonight on behalf of my union to express our support for the proposed project at 30 Jump Street. 32 BJ is the largest property services union in the country, representing 85,000 property service workers in New York City, including more than 1,500 who live in the Greenpoint Williamsburg neighborhood and 486 members who work in the community. 32 BJ supports responsible developers who invest in the communities where they build. I'm happy to report that Rubenstein Partners and Acme Smoked Fish have made a credible commitment to create prevailing wage building service jobs at this site. This commitment is an investment in the community by providing wages and benefits that give working families opportunity for upward mobility and security. We estimate that this development will lead to the creation of 18 new janitorial jobs and about 8 security jobs. It is not often that companies like Acme Smoked Fish stay in New York City, and we are so pleased that a company with deep roots in the community is able to expand and develop their facilities while providing opportunities for the community. We are in full support of this project, and we have full confidence that Rubenstein and Acme Smoked Fish will be a responsible employer and presence in the community. For these reasons, we respectfully urge you to approve this rezoning. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Leah Archibald.
Leah, you can unmute yourself.
I am hopefully unmuted now. Hi,
Yes, you are.
so fabulous. So my name is Leah Archibald, and I am the executive director of Evergreen. We're the local development corporation that works with businesses in industrial North Brooklyn to help them grow so that we can keep quality working class jobs in our community. We are very much in favor of the Acme Smoked Fish expansion. I've submitted some more detailed written testimony, but the thing I would like to say, in my couple minutes to present here is, in the past we've supported similar mixed industrial commercial developments before, but we believe that the Acme project is the platinum standard for this kind of a model, and not just for this model, but for economic equity. You know, Acme is investing in their future by constructing a modern manufacturing facility that's going to allow them to stay and grow in North Brooklyn for another 4 generations. About 75% of Acme's production workforce are first-generation immigrants, 40% of the staff are Latino, and 30% are Black, 5% are Asian. 88% of their workforce lives within 5 miles of the facility. So, you know, truly, you can say that the benefits of this investment accrue really directly to folks that live and work in the community. You know, and right now, this is the time. It is important right now, you know, because of, you know, COVID and, you know, the terrible economic collapse that we have been experiencing in New York City, and the unjust impact of both COVID and the economic collapse to communities of color. In helping Acme grow is helping New York City manufacturers, and in turn, that helps make an investment in our economic recovery. So, you know, not only will we help this direct investment in Acme and their many excellent paying jobs, but it's laying pipe for an equitable economic recovery at the time that we most need it right now. Thank you very much for letting me speak, and I've submitted more detailed written testimony.
Okay, we have a speaker who is on the phone, and her name is, one moment, Laura Trisiokas.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Trisiokas. I'm a Greenpoint resident. I live just a few blocks away from the current Acme facility. I'm also a member of the Guernsey Oak Street Neighborhood Block Association, as well as a board member of the North Brooklyn Neighbors, which focuses on local environmental and community planning issues. I am here this evening to let everyone know that while we support the idea of Acme staying in our neighborhood, we really object to the height and the size of this development. At 175 feet, it's really out of context with the surrounding neighborhood. This is a largely residential area with, you know, mostly dominated by 2 to 4 story buildings. And at 175 feet, this would be totally out of context with the surrounding neighborhood. If you stand across the street from this development at the currently vacant lot that is Bayside Fuel, and you look northward towards Greenpoint, you begin to appreciate that this development would totally dominate the skyline view. And so as this development would take light and air from the surrounding neighborhood, we would ask for a serious commitment from the developers to 2 things. One, the development of the adjacent public open space, which is Bushwick Inlet Park, as well as serious consideration for some kind of community space on site as a commitment to the community and what it's giving up in terms of its skyline. That's all I have to say.
I believe those are all the speakers that we have on this item. However, we do have 2 other speakers who did not have the opportunity to testify on 300 Huntington Street. Is there an opportunity to reopen the application at this time for additional testimony?
Yes, we could take the speakers and have them be recorded for the second item.
Great. Could we please put up the slide to allow those who had difficulty logging in to call into the hearing instead?
Can we close the hearing on Acme now, though?
Sure. If there's no additional speakers on Acme, we'll close the hearing on Acme, briefly reopen the hearing on 300 Huntington.
Thank you very much.
Great. If we could show our slide with the call-in information. Thank you.
A few seconds to get those slides back.
No problem. In the meantime, I will call the speakers who are interested in testifying again on this item. That would be Celeste Lecomte, followed by Owen Foote.
All right, who are you calling back?
So two people, Celeste Lecomte, who didn't have the opportunity to testify, and Owen Foote, who was not able to be heard. So if you could put up the hearing information slide so that those people can either try to reconnect or log or call in. So I think we can give those people a few minutes to try to reach out to us again. And if not, we can probably move on to the next item.
They've all dropped off. I don't see them anywhere.
All right. Hey, Richard, are we ready to open the
Yeah,
next
so
item?
if they're not able to call, we still have an opportunity at the end of the next item if they still want to get on. But we call, so calendar item number 3, we mentioned is closed. Calendar item number 4, 210043 ZMK.
This application is submitted by Dawn Kiernan and NRL URF LLC pursuant to section 7-C 201 of the New York City Charter to a map C1-4 overlay on the existing R6A and R6B zone along the eastern side of Bedford Avenue between North 9th and North 10th Streets. The requested amendment would facilitate a 5-story mixed-use building with 7 dwelling units and approximately 3,250 square feet of commercial space at 135-137 Bedford Avenue in Community District 1. Community Board 1 approved this application on December 8th, 2020. Would Richard Lobel, the representative for this application, please state your name for the record and present the application?
Good evening again, Richard Lobel from Sheldon Lobel PC, joined by Fayan Baton from my office. And we will be presenting the 135 to 137 Bedford Avenue rezoning. Waiting for the presentation. Excellent, thank you, Dave. So you can see two pictures from the frontage along Bedford Avenue between North 9th and 10th. I think you go to the next slide. So this application merely seeks to map a C14 overlay. And you can note from this slide, and also, David, if you want to forward to the next slide, that the circled area in which the property is located is currently in R6A and R6B districts along Bedford Avenue. So in this area along North 5th to North 11th Street on the western portion of Bedford, and between North 5th and North 8th on the eastern portion, there already exists C14 overlays. So I'd say within the surrounding 10 blocks between North 5th and North 11th, roughly 80% of those currently have commercial overlays. And so, as you would imagine, this contributes to Bedford Avenue being a commercial thoroughfare in the area and one which is populated by businesses, restaurants, stores, etc. Also to note, can you go to the next slide? Is that on our property, and specifically on the block on which we're located, there's already an existing MX8 M12 R6A, which in some form has been in existence since dating back to 1973. So the block itself is really heavily populated by commercial uses. The properties immediately to the east and adjacent to these 10 lots fronting on Bedford can already be populated not merely by retail uses, but by M uses. Immediately across the street and to the southwest are commercial overlays. So, really what this amounts to is almost a general flavor of commercial uses along Bedford here, and importantly, puts these properties at somewhat of a disadvantage by forcing them to adhere to merely residential zoning requirements. Next slide. So here's the land use map, and as you would expect, the land use map reflects what you would find in commercial overlays along Bedford. But importantly, on our block, on lots 1, 9, 10, 8, portion of 34, you already have commercial uses. So in the event that this rezoning is approved, as we hope it would in accordance with the community board recommendation, a number of these commercial uses, these existing commercial uses, would become conforming commercial uses. Obviously, that's a benefit to the owners of those buildings in that they would now be conforming. They can go to Department of Buildings, make as of right changes to those properties. Opposing that is now in the current position, it's a rather onerous process of your existing grandfathered use to make any changes to your commercial use. So again, you notice not merely the C14 overlay, but also the M12 R7A, which exists along Bedford 2 blocks to the north of us. Many of these blocks are inhabited by commercial uses and commercial overlays. Additionally, on the block to the northwest of us, there is 116 Bedford. That was itself the subject of the 116 Bedford rezoning application, an application brought by our office and approved in January 2018. And that similarly marked the frontage along North 10th and North 11th to the west on Bedford with a commercial overlay. Next slide. So what you see here is the frontage along Bedford, and you can see some commercial uses existing to the northern end of the block. Next slide. And that's a shot from the northeast corner of Bedford and North 10th. So as you walk along this block, there's a number of commercial uses. David, feel free to page through the photos. And now we come to the zoning change diagram. So very simply, you can see the bifurcated R6A and R6B district between North 9th and North 10th. And after the commercial overlay rezoning within the dotted area, you see a C14 overlay. Importantly, this is a merely a commercial overlay rezoning. So the underlying R6A and R6B zoning remain the same. The building type remains the same. This really is a rezoning solely for use, which is, I think, one of the things that was persuasive to the community board. The type of building, the bulk of the building, all remains the same here. You merely are now able to populate that ground floor with commercial uses. I think that may be the end of the presentation. Oh, this one last slide is merely to illustrate that we did take a look at the commercial uses on our block. And on this block itself, even prior to any rezoning, roughly 88% of the block consists of commercial uses. And then, as we mentioned, approximately 50% of the project area consists of commercial uses. So this is one of those rezonings where when we look at a conformance analysis, we look at the conformance before and after the proposed rezoning. Within the rezoning area, right now you go from a condition where you have close to 50% nonconformance to one where you have 100% conformance, which we view as a hallmark of a good rezoning. Next slide. That is the end of the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
That was a false alarm.
The good kind.
Yeah. So before we get into Q&A, if there are any viewers that would like to testify, please indicate in the chat to our WebEx host, and then we'll call your name at the end of the Q&A. Okay, so the first question, so we have three for you, Richard. Community Board 1 is aware that the outdoor and backyard operations of eating and drinking establishments sometimes generate a lot of noise and noise complaints. Given the number of bars and restaurants along Bedford Avenue, the possibility that such a tenant would occupy the proposed development space, what consideration would be given to constructing a full ground floor?
So I think that the applicant would definitely consider building a full ground floor for a few reasons. The first is that, in rezoning such as this, we submit illustrative plans to city planning. So it's nothing that we're tied to like a special permit, but for rezonings, we show them what we'd like to do. And in those plans, we did demonstrate a full lot coverage, ground floor, commercial use. So to the extent that it is a retail use, of course, it's advantageous for a retail user to be able to get that rear space. This is a relatively shallow lot. The frontage of this lot is roughly, the joined lot between 135 and 137 is roughly 32 feet of frontage, and it goes about 80 feet deep. So there's really not a lot of room to play with here. And the applicant here was more than happy to provide for that full lot coverage. Moreover, there will be residential units in the building that would be generated. And so for that reason, it would be advantageous to not have an open use in the rear. So I think the applicant is happy to do that. I would note here that when we started this project a couple of years ago, this was actually proceeding as, this was an intended development. Since that time, really, it's been on hiatus. And then with COVID, this has not become an active development project. We're continuing with the rezoning application because we view it as advantageous for the property and as for the block. But there's really no intended development right now. There's no intended start date, et cetera. So again, most of the stuff that we're discussing and would discuss is conjecture. But again, we understand the community board's concerns, and upon discussion with the applicant, they said that would be something they'd be interested in doing.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question deals with promoting renewable and sustainable energy. Excuse me, which is very important to the borough president. So what consideration has been given to work with DEP, CERTA, NIPA to incorporate passive house designs, DEP rain gardens, blue, green, and white roof covering, excuse me?
Yes, so, again, I think with the nature of the project, because we don't really have a proposed development right now, the project itself is only roughly 8,800 square feet. So I think the answer would be that in the event that we do end up building, we would be happy to consider, at a minimum, obviously we'd comply with law and would be providing whatever is required under the building code as far as energy sensitive measures are concerned. I would note that the applicant right now has solar panels existing on the building on 137. So this is something that we're actively engaged in right now. But I think that, again, although it's not currently planned, I think it's something that they would definitely look into and would be happy to, to attempt to provide us whatever measures are desired.
Okay, thank you. The last question deals with the Borough President's policy in terms of maximizing good quality jobs. So if you can outline what steps have been taken to include MWBEs or local business enterprises for construction on this site.
Yeah, I think, again, given the size of the project, it's not something that we've really gone into very deeply. But to the extent that we take advantage of any abatement programs that are relying upon MBWE and local hiring, we're happy to engage in that. Moreover, I think that one of the important things for us on this project, as has been the case for many of the other commercial overlay rezonings, is the actual creation of long-lasting jobs at the site. So right now you've got no legal commercial uses on the ground floor of the site, whereas going forward, you'd be creating 3,200 square feet or so of active commercial uses. So that in and of itself, in order to create, would enable the applicant here to create, local jobs, and it would be a preference, I think, for the surrounding community. So again, not something we're currently planning on, but moving forward, I think it's something that the applicant would be happy to take a look at.
Thank you. That concludes my questions for you tonight. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Ina, is there anyone that would like to testify on this calendar item?
No one has indicated intent to do so or to testify on any of the previous items at this hearing.
I think I did see something in the chat. Hold on one second.
There was one person that messaged me if he's still on, Richard Mazer. You want to see if Richard Mazer is still available.
Richard, you're unmuted. Richard, you're unmuted.
And Richard is here to speak on the Acme Fish.
Richard, you're unmuted. Richard, you're unmuted. Richard may be having technical issues.
If Richard maybe wants to try the phone line as an alternative, we want to put up the phone number, give Richard a chance to call in.
Would you like to, I'm not sure if you'd like to close our hearing at this point.
Yeah, sure. Now we have no speakers in this item. We could close out calendar item 4, and if Richard's successful calling in or something, we'll reopen that item quickly.
Thank you.
So again, Richard, if you see the slide here, if you could call in that number, we can then take your testimony on the Acme item.
Hello? Can you hear me?
We hear you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I guess I'm technologically at a disadvantage. All right, listen, Richard, it's Rich Mazer. I know all of you people. I haven't spoken to in a long time. This is the first time I've ever had to testify on behalf of an item that actually created a Pavlovian response, and I salivated when I heard the Acme smoked fish logo. I'm actually a long-term resident, housing developer, environmental activist, whatever. And I've been here a long time. I'm an immigrant since 1950, and my history with Acme smoked fish goes back to all of friends of my family that got to work there as immigrants, and that's both in the 50s, 60s, and as recently as maybe 10 years ago, where one of my housekeepers actually worked with Acme smoked fish. I've lived here all my life. I don't think Acme fish should leave. It's a part of our community. It's our history. It's our legacy. And I think it's our future of work and live situation that I think has made the community what it is, and would be a shame to lose it. Contextually, the area has always been an industrial wasteland. It never really looked good, even though I understand Lord Trisiokas' concerns of the height issues. I kind of like the architecture, and I will leave that to the experts. I'm a huge proponent of this project, and I can't wait to eat some more smoked fish. That's pretty much it.
Okay, so I think we've accommodated all those who have been wanting to speak then.
I thought there were two names, Richard, but maybe not.
There are no
Yeah,
more
we had
requests
two
in the
people.
chat.
Did we have the people from the Gowanus item, or they didn't stick through?
I believe they did not stick around.
Okay. If no one else would like to testify, the hearing on these items is now closed. Actually, Richard, if you would close the calendar item. Or did we do that? I'm confused now. What we did.
Yes, calendar item 4 was closed, and we're re-closing calendar item 3 to accommodate Rich Mazer.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you for participating in this remote public hearing. Borough President Adams will review the 4 applications heard today and submit his recommendations to the City Planning Commission for further consideration. Borough President Adams would like to take this opportunity to remind you that the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on these items, which will be announced at a later date. Borough President Adams would also like to remind viewers that comments can be submitted by email to askeric@brooklynbp.nyc.gov. This hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, David Perez, for your technical assistance tonight, and thank you to Richard and Ina in preparing us for today. And everyone have a wonderful holiday.
Thanks. Happy holidays.
Have a good one.
Holiday. Bye-bye.